Skinner, but I was going because I had a relationship with someone who moved back to Seattle, and I would go and we would backpack. But while I was in Seattle, Joan Skinner's intensive was going on, and she let me crash the intensive. So I would just take class for free. And it was all out of order. Like when I studied Skinner leasing, I did like the more advanced work before I did the more introductory work, because that's when I was there. And I never knew what the introductory work was until later. And so I did it all ass backwards, but she was very encouraging. She would come to New York every year and teach, and I would always take her class. And also Bob Davidson back then would sometimes come to New York and take his class. And Yvonne Meyer had gone to Seattle the summer before me. She came to New York, and much to Joan's dismay, started teaching. And that was the first releasing class I had, was Yvonne Meyer's class. And so I was just getting it wherever I could and as much as I could. So then I didn't move to Seattle until 1993. And that's when I did teacher training and some other things in 1993.
I could keep going, but I'm looking at the clock. Does anyone want to jump in with a question? Or maybe if they come to you, you could
I just have a question, and obviously I haven't been in the workshop, so maybe you talked about this, but just because I'm really drawn to the idea of egalitarianism and how everyone can bring ideas forward, and I'm wondering how you approach like cultivating that egalitarianism while also cultivating this like sense of rigor, so that because I feel like sometimes when all ideas are valid, somehow it's sort of hard to sift through all of the ideas, sort of like you're saying, like watching 20 hours of improvisation. Like, I think it's fairly quick when you introduce all ideas, like then the work of figuring out which ideas matter without discounting the other ideas, I feel like that becomes a challenge so that things don't get watered down.
Well, see, I didn't have a total collaboration. I was always the director. And that 20 hours of video was because I was a complete novice in that way of working. I've choreographed from videotape improvisation since then, and I learned how to do it more efficiently. But, well, a lot of things come up. Like, yes, we welcome the ideas, but some of them are, just like, don't work with, and so, like, I was the person that would sift through the ideas. Some of the ideas are really great, and I think that people's ideas are really relevant when you, as the director, share all your thoughts, and, even if they're half-formed, but what are you thinking about? What are some of the themes that are coming up? What kind of process? Like, I would share everything, so that somebody's idea would be, like, relevant to the context that had been created. So people weren't just coming up with, well, I've always wanted to, like, pee in a bucket on stage. Can I do that? I mean, they have to do with what we're working on. So that, I think, is something that directors can, perhaps consider, is, rather than having it rather than having it be a mystery, like really, if you are working collaboratively, to really share, what is this about, to the extent that it's about something, even if it's about a process that you're exploring. So the ideas are related, sort of, we're on the same pond here, and that people are excited, about it. And, what happens is that eventually, most of the people in my company then went on to become choreographers, many of them much more successful than me. One has been Chambre, who's quite successful choreographer based in Montreal now, David Rousseau, who's in LA. So they learned so much working this way, and they were so empowered to, the next step for them was to go on, so which is very satisfying actually. So usually the relationship, ended well, and it didn't end. It keeps going. I become colleagues, and it's a really wonderful thing. But I do think that sometimes we associate rigor with, like unison, perfect unison. But, this way of working is really rigorous. I mean, learning from video is no shortcut. If you've done it, obviously, because someone who's done it's hard to do. And then you're not just doing what you see, you're improving on it, you're technically, but it can be really amazing to learn your own movement that you improvise. Because at first, when you improvise it, it feels usually great, if it's something that you think is worth learning. And then when you learn it, it's like, it starts to feel unnatural. And you go through this really uncomfortable period. And then you can do it, start doing it technically, like any movement that you would technically want to fulfill, and figure out how to do it even better. And so, in the end, it can feel really fabulous because you're actually doing your movement, but you're doing it like the best, you're really it's flowering. And somehow when you do that, you can go on with how you move. Like you can move through, it's like I move this way, and you can go on sort of your journey of expanding your movement vocabulary because you're so much fulfilling what you're already doing. So it's a really wonderful way of exploring your movement potential as a creative, as a movement artist, to actually technically learn it the way if you were given a phrase and you had to, technically do it really well. It's like, where's the initiation? Where's the power? The arms following through, or the initiating, it's like all the things about the movement that you can really perceive and learn and do. And what's the texture? And today, when we talked about like seeing someone do a movement and then doing the sound version, Benoit was like the quickest study. He was the quickest learner in the company. I'd say, okay, Benoit, go and learn this solo, and he'd say, 5 minutes later, okay, Steph, what else do you want me to do? And he would have learned it, and so he had the biggest part in the piece because he learned the fastest. And I noticed how he learned. He sang the movement. Like different people learn different ways. Some people sort of sketch the whole thing. Some people learn every detail. I'm more detail-oriented and go real slow. But Benoit would sort of learn the song of it and the rhythm of it right when you start, and the texture. He would sing it. And he was just learning really, really fast. It was really interesting that I was thinking about that when we were talking about it today, how Benoit used to learn, and he was so quick with it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because you were saying about like the empowerment of people, and part of that in the process was them actually performing their own movements.
Right.
But would they also learn each other's or yours, or did you have it?
Well, not in that piece. And I decided, I found that psychologically I was creating narcissists. Because that actually happened, that people started getting really kind of narcissistic and into themselves. This is what I want, this is what I need. And I realized that there's something about just like doing your own thing all the time.
Right.
Even though you're deeply relating, connecting, we had a lot of partnering. Because we would also improvise duets, and like sometimes you're improvising and you sort of almost do a lift, and then when you like learn that from video, you can fulfill some of those half things. So even though there was all that partnering and all of that working together to make things happen, people were kind of getting into like, I'm this way. And so I decided like after that I would have people learn each other's movement just because psychologically to take the edge off. But that was really interesting, like that process, what it sort of breathes in us. So I didn't have just all of these robots, I just had all these narcissists. Not everyone, but it did seem to bring them out sometimes. So that was interesting. And, it's also interesting because in the early days when I was choreographing, I couldn't afford to rehearse that much. I couldn't afford to pay for studio. So I was doing structured improvisations. And then I went through that whole period of learning from video, and then I get really tired of video. I'm tired of the equipment and all the things that can go wrong with it. And I just never want to see another video camera, another monitor. And I stopped that process. And more recently, I'm actually back to structured improvisation. So I've almost like you know, not exactly come full circle, but improvisation just interests me more now. So I mean, I do choreograph